Nanti saya akan memperkenalkan untuk pembicara kita, siapa Pak Christoph Stücklerberger. Lalu saya akan mempersilakan Pak Christoph untuk menyampaikan materinya di dalam bahasa Inggris. Saya tidak akan memotong beliau dengan terjemahan, jadi harap saudara-saudara memperhatikan dengan baik. Setelah beliau mempresentasikan materi, nanti mungkin ada respon atau sum up dulu dari para dosen, Pak Yahya, Pak Oce, dan saya untuk bicara tentang apa yang disampaikan Pak Christoph. Baru kita masuk dalam tanya jawab. Nah, tanya jawab bisa dilakukan dalam bahasa Inggris, atau kalau saudara-saudara mau bertanya dalam bahasa Indonesia, nanti saya akan bantu menerjemahkan kepada Pak Christoph, lalu supaya Pak Christoph merespon. Namun sebelum kita mulai dalam kuliah umum kita, saya mempersilahkan Pak Robert sebagai dekan untuk menyambut Pak Christoph di depan. Terima kasih.
So good morning everyone, and especially our esteemed guest, Professor Dr. Christoph Stücklerberger, our old colleague, friend, who has visited this university several times in the past and quite recently, if I remember well, and befriended to our colleagues like Yahya Wijaya, Herit Singhi. You can tell that they are old people, so we are from the old generation, including me. But happily we receive you because this is 2024. You see a lot of young students here. We are changing. This is a new generation of theologians. They are still studying, but we expect them to be great theologians. And that is one of the reasons that they are here. That is, we always invite our friends, overseas friends, to come and talk to them and share their thoughts to our students in order for them to be exposed internationally and know what is the struggle in the other part of the world, and especially in Europe. And this is also our privilege to have you here, Professor Stücklerberger, and especially for you to share your thoughts to our students, young students. And of course, apology if they are too young to follow perhaps the complicated things, but we try hard to understand your presentation, and it is good to be met between you and our students here. As we enter the new phase of global life, see a lot of uneasy things happening, war in the Middle East, also in Europe, closer to you than to us. Also still we are remembering how religions are struggling with the issue of radicalism, and of course this is very apt to us in Indonesia, corruption. Our government knows well how to tame the people, how to make the people follow them, that is through religion. And it's always something happen in the relationship between the state or the politicians and religion. And of course, a lot of what we call as corruption happening there. People are very open when they talk about religion, that religion can do good things for bad things. Corruption, we call it as a money laundry, for example. It's happening here also. And of course, quite recently, you have also offered from the government or religious organizations to manage mine, mine in several parts of Indonesia. That's the struggle of us. So we are very happy to have you here and talk about this corruption-free religions are still possible, even though we are very skeptical, but we would like to hear from you a very optimistic view perhaps, and very critical of course, as we know you. And before we start, let me also express our thankful, our grateful to you through this small token. If you like to go to the front. And, yeah. Okay, later. This one first, yeah. You can open it, even though it is unusual for Indonesian to open this souvenir in front of people, but no, because this is special. So we need you to open this in front of our students. This is different.
You already take some photos. Another one.
This is a public painting. Yeah, it is produced by one of our alumni. And what is the theme?
This is David and Juliet.
Kuliah.
And I have one in my house.
David and Kuliah.
David and Kuliah.
So you and I, we have
Pak Oce was studying with Christoph Stücklerberger. So when Pak Oce did his PhD under the supervision of Christoph Stücklerberger. So they are very close.
The Kuliah is corruption.
Okay, yeah. Okay. Oh yeah,
Thank you. Thank you very much.
yeah. So, thank you so much. Yeah, so I give the mic to Nella.
Ya. Sebagaimana yang sudah disampaikan, sedikit tadi saya ingin memperkenalkan Pak Christoph sebagai pembicara. Jadi Pak Christoph adalah profesor di bidang etika. Dia bekerja di pendidikan terkait dengan etika di dalam level global, ya, bertahun-tahun lamanya. Dan saat ini dia adalah profesor emeritus dari University of Basel, ya, di Switzerland, dan distinguished professor di Technical University Moscow, visiting professor juga di GOU University di Nigeria, dan Minsu University di Beijing, Leeds University Business School di Leeds, dan juga memperoleh Dr. Honoris Causa dari dua universitas di Kongo dan Bulgaria. Sebagaimana yang saudara-saudara lihat, bidang utama beliau terkait dengan riset dan mengajar di dalam kaitannya dengan etika global, yang dikaitkan dengan bisnis ethics, ya, etika lingkungan, etika transaksional, gitu ya, atau finansial, bahkan cyber ethics. Pak Christoph juga adalah seorang founder dan presiden dari Global Network on Ethics, ya, Globe Ethics Foundation, yang saudara-saudara mungkin sering mengunjungi di browser saudara-saudara untuk mendownload buku-buku dari Globe Ethics, ya. Lalu juga Geneva Agape Foundation yang berada di Switzerland. Ya, saya pikir itu perkenalan yang bisa saya sampaikan. Nanti kita akan langsung masuk ke materi yang akan disampaikan oleh Pak Christoph. Mohon perhatian dari saudara-saudara. Presentasinya akan dilakukan dalam bahasa Inggris full tanpa interupsi dari saya untuk menerjemahkan. So we are truly honored to have you here, and without further ado, let us welcome Pak Christoph Stücklerberger, and please join me in giving his a warm applause.
Thank you very much, terima kasih for this warm welcome. We are very Okay, can you hear me? Yes. Thank you very much for this warm welcome. I learned slowly again some words in Indonesian, and some are easy. Christo and Amen and Hallelujah. Okay, so I'm happy to be with you and very thankful to see also my young friends from the past. I was here in Indonesia several times, maybe 10 times all in all. But starting with development projects, I will come back to that. Now this beautiful batik, is that corruption that I received it, yes or no? What do you think? It's a token. And the distinction is, it was given openly, you have taken pictures, but corruption is under the table. Not visible, no pictures, if possible no documents, but here it's documented. You all have seen, and you can estimate the value or not, it's a gift. So I just start with this very simple example of distinction between a gift and a bribe. Do you know what is NAE? NAE, what stands for? You don't know, of course you cannot know. I was asked 30 years ago to talk about in a conference with commercial traders who did trade with Asia, with other countries, and they asked me to give a talk about NAE, and I said, what's that? That's necessary added expenses. And I said, oh, what's that? That's another word for bribe. Because I said, okay, they invited me first to speak about bribery and ethics. But then they said, no, we cannot announce it as bribery. We have a term, NAE, and everybody knows what it means. So you see, 30 years ago, to talk about corruption was very sensitive. Because people feared, oh, if I mention it, that they will criticize me and everybody's doing it, but you should not do, and so on. Now, 30 years later, or let's say 10 years after 30 years, so 20 years ago, it changed. Now it's on the table. And when I left the car, there was an old newspaper, and what was the title? Korupsi. So 22, Korupsi is in export, CPO, so in trade, in export. So that's where we come from. Now let me start with a few, describe my journey on that topic. It was you who proposed the topic here, and I hesitated first, but I'm happy that we can talk about it. So 95, so almost, yeah, I started 94, and then 95, I became founder and president of Transparency Switzerland. Transparency is this global organization against corruption. It was founded in 94, and I said, oh, wonderful, I found the Swiss chapter of that. Then we had an international network of faith-based organizations against corruption. It never really took off, but some activities followed. Then last 30 years, a lot of trainings for church leaders, for business leaders, for politicians, for administrators, for deans and professors and students in different countries. And 2010, 14 years ago, I published the book Corruption-Free Churches Are Possible, and then the book of today, Corruption-Free Religions Are Possible, and now I'm just revising the book of 2010. Why I mention that? Because I started with the business sector, and one trigger point was Indonesia. Organization, Protestant development organization, and I visited Kalimantan. Was teaching in Banjarmasin also. I visited the forests. There were these burning forests, tropical forests. And I discussed and ate about corruption in deforestation. It's not new forestation. It's not new for you. You know these stories. Malaysian, Japanese companies, you know, who got a license to cut tropical trees in a big extent, not square meters, but square kilometers. And a lot of it was due to deals with the government, the then government, I'm not talking about today. So a company comes in, there is a protected forest, you pay not $1, but some millions to get the license to cut the trees. So that was the trigger, and I said, that's so prying. Why should I collect money from our parish members in Switzerland, $10, $50, for supporting projects in Indonesia? And then on the other hand is this big corruption, which has such a devastating influence. So that motivated me to say, if we are in development, in Christian development, we need to deal with the corruption issue. So the private sector and the collusion between private and public sector was the starting point. But the more we developed, the more organizations also took care about the private sector. And the international standards became stricter. So in private sector, it's now still a lot of corruption, but also a lot of control and standards and risks, especially for foreign companies. They can go to jail if they are not respecting some standards. But as we know, corruption is a systemic issue. It's not just one sector or one person, it's whole society which can be based on that. And that's why then educational sector, NGO sector, health sector, social services sectors, and religions can be affected. And that's why I focus now today on this sector. Of course, there are big differences, and also to make sure, I'm not talking about Indonesia, I'm talking about a global phenomenon. So I started then, of course, the time to challenge the companies in Switzerland, the Nestle's, the pharmaceuticals, the trade organizations, the mining sector. So how are you dealing with that you are part of the problem, the Swiss companies? I'm not finger pointing to Indonesians or Filipino or Chinese or whatever. I'm finger pointing to the Swiss as my country of origin. So now one would say, and sometimes I'm asked this question, yeah, you are fighting against corruption since 30 years. You know, it still exists, so why don't you give up? And this question is a trigger, so why I go to the next slide. And I hope you, we do not give up, but why? And I give also Christian reasons. Some people say corruption is as old as humanity. By the way, you will have these slides also. Take notes, but give it to you also as a PPT, PDF. You said that. Okay. So, people say, yeah, corruption is as old as humanity. That's true. If you read the Bible, you'll find corruption already in the Old Testament, 2,500 years ago. But the argument is the fight against corruption is as old as humanity. There have been the prophets, there have been the wise people who said, no, corruption, even if it's happening everywhere and at any time, is not justified. The second argument, almost everybody pays and receives bribes. The argument in favor of not giving up, fatalism is a sin in all religions. It negates divine power of change. Fatalism means, oh, we are not counting on God. God, if we are believers and we count that God is alive, and God is not something 10,000 years ago when He created the globe. It's a lively power, and then means we count that God can help us to change. Fatalism is a sin because it does not count on the divine energy. In Christianity, we call it the Holy Spirit. The argument in business, without corruption, we cannot do business. And it's true in many cases. People say, look, I want to build a church. I need the permission from the local government, or from the mayor, or from the Department of Construction. I want to build that church, but I need to pay some bribes to get the signature. So what do you do? It's a real dilemma. I don't judge and say, this is a bad pastor. He is in a dilemma, or she. You may be pastors, you may be business people. And I just heard that when you mentioned the mining, now to give rights to mining to religions is not a bad idea in terms of, yes, religions need an economic basis. If they own land or if they own a mining, they depend less on the daily or Sunday offerings. So, but, there is a but. How to manage then a church-run mining company in a transparent way is a huge challenge, and I would like to take this challenge to say, yes, government, give a mine to a church, or better to a foundation of the church, a separate legal entity. And we want to make sure that it is clean, fair mining. And it's possible, because I know I was involved in mining sector efforts. Clean mining is very difficult because mining is one of the most corrupt sectors. It's official, it's not my analysis. These are the official figures. So if you enter into mining as a church, it's a high risk, but it's a high potential. So we need your young brains to develop and to monitor and to campaign for a fair mining. I am too small to fight. I'm a student, it's not my business, my issue. But collective action is needed. I'm against these heroes, I'm the single fighter and I'm killed and then I'm the hero. No, that's not what we need. We need collective action. My drop of water in the sea does not count nor makes a difference. We know this with so much, and it doesn't make a difference if I pay this little fee for getting the signature. But the counter-argument, a drop of water for a thirsty person makes a difference. Each action counts. So you see the perspective, changing the perspective. The last one, I'm not strong to swim against the current. And then we are confronted with the Bible, which encourages us again and again to swim against, or to be the salt and the light of the earth. Even if you are a few, you can make a difference. That's Jesus' gospel, So these are just a few things to motivate ourselves. And I ask myself this question, why I don't give up after 30 years. I'm retired, I could have go to the beach or whatever. But I said, no, as long as I breathe and I can do something and God gives me health, I try what I can. Now, these are some of the publications I mentioned. I will come back to them. You see, this one is also interesting. African church assets handbook. Churches have assets. They have land, they have churches, they have church buildings, they have maybe a hotel, they have a university campus. So these are all assets. And to manage the assets in a good way is a key element of cleaning, or to have a good, solid, transparent institution. Is it the parish? Is it the university? Is it the pastor's house? Is it whatever? Now, in this book, why I used them from the churches, I went to other religions. One reason was that in minority situations, like in Indonesia, but much more in India, the trigger was in India, when churches are 2% of the Indian population, some areas 1%. And then, if the church says, yes, we want to fight corruption in the church, then the Hindu majority comes and says, yes, we knew, you churches, you are the bad guys, we the Hindu, we are the clean ones. And then, wait a minute, it's not true. You have corruption in Hinduism as well, in Buddhism as well, in Islam as well. We had here in Chokcha, I think it was about 20 years ago, a conference on corruption in Islam or in an Islamic and Christian perspective. I think it was maybe ICRS, I'm not sure. So we had a conference where Muslim and Christians together said we need to cooperate when it comes to corruption issues in order not to be seen as, oh, that's your problem, not my problem. It's a common problem. So I have here an article about Hindu temple in China, about Buddhist, the top Buddhist in China is in jail now because of corruption. The Pope of the Buddhists in China is in jail. So, and in Islam, we have an article in this book about the pilgrimage to Mecca, and Medina. So the agencies, you know these stories, it was some years back in the media. Also, Islamic organizations can be affected. So, but what I try to show in this is there are complaint mechanisms, there are international norms which are also valid for religions. Don't think that if the state says people with corruption go to jail, that also valid for religious leaders, if needed. We also have interesting target groups, like in Brazil, there is an association, Brazilian Association of Christian Lawyers. I don't know if you have a Christian Lawyers Association in Indonesia, you have? You see, so Christian lawyers can help us because they know the law. They can help us in trainings, to sharpen our mind about these topics. The cooperation between religions and state authorities. We sometimes think, oh, the state is the state, we want to stand on our own. But some agencies in the governments are also open to cooperate with Muslim organizations, with Christian organizations, and say, okay, Christian organizations are important in the country, even if they are minority in Indonesia. And if you give the signal, can we have a training together with a state auditor? How do you audit organizations? What can we learn from that? So that shows also an example of willingness to cooperate and not to stay apart. Now, the issue of corruption is, the tragedy of corruption is, it reflects a crisis of trust in institutions. And institutions are in a decreasing or in an increasing trust crisis, and across sectors, governments, Of course, you say, the new government, provincial government elected 2 days ago, is it less corrupt or more corrupt? Even if you don't express it, but I'm sure we have it in our mind as, we want a less corrupt government, and this is one criteria how to vote. Judiciary. The judiciary system is one of the most important, because what do you do if you feel you want to defend your rights? You have the right to build a church or a parish hall, and the government does not give you the license, even though you have all the proofs, all the papers, all the normal payments you have done, and then it's blocked just because somebody in the administration wants some additional fees under the table. What do you do? In the worst case, you go to court. Or you have a corrupt politician or a corrupt business person. You go to court. But many people, for example in Africa, many countries, they told me, no chance. I only lose money when I go to court because I know the court will not give me the right. The court is a corrupt system, is part of the problem and not of the solution. So what do you do? Then it's very important to have credible lawyers, credible judges. So I trained judges of Supreme Courts in Mexico. I was surprised. That was a lady who was elected as a new president of the Supreme Court of the Tabasco state. And she heard that I'm teaching in Mexico City. She called me and said, I need your teaching. Come. I said, what is the fire in the house? She said, I'm new. I want to clean my court. My court is so corrupt. Come and teach us and give us an encouragement how to have judges which are less corrupt. I was shocked. And then a big hall, 200 Supreme Court judges of Tabasco state, one state in Mexico. Just because the new president was correct and she was a Christian, and I said, I cannot accept to be president of a corrupt. So you see, a person can make a difference. She was new in the job and she wanted to make a difference. So it's an encouragement. Don't think we can't do anything. Each single person can do something. Media, educational institutions, religious institutions, finance institutions. Now, let us talk about definition and form. Definition and form. What is then corruption? An overall definition is corruption is the abuse of entrusted power for personal gain and interest. So, you have a position as a teacher, as a judge, as a governor, or as a head of the visa department in the visa section of, and so on. You have a little or a bigger power, and you abuse this power for your personal gain. And there are different forms. What we call the grand corruption is a result of greed normally, or a minister who has a big salary does not need corruption money. But he or she, normally a he, we can say normal corruption is more done by male than female. It's another chapter, we can discuss it, but I did some research on that. So the grand corruption as a result of greed, I want more power, more money. The corruption of poverty is the opposite, petty corruption. It's a result of need. In Indonesia, I think it's not, or at least that I did not experience in recent times, But in many countries in Africa, you travel, and every 5 kilometers a policeman stops you. Oh, your wheel is something is wrong, this is wrong, and the driver already knows there's nothing wrong with the wheel. He just wants $2, equivalent. And then you give it because you need to go. So that's the petty corruption, and somehow I have pity also because I understand the policeman in many countries may earn $30 a month, and this we cannot live with $30 a month. So that's why we understand they need to get some additional income, even though it's not justified. The corruption of acceleration, that's the delivery of services. You know, you can have a visa application, you need to go to Singapore for something, and you need a visa. No, Singapore you don't need it, but let's say a country where you need a visa, and you are invited to a conference, and you need to go, you need to have a visa quickly. Now, there are two ways. You have an ordinary visa, or you can have an express visa, and then it's officially the tariff. If you pay another $30, you get an express visa. That's the official tariff. That is not corruption. That is an official policy if you need a visa soon. But it is corruption if there is no such policy, and the official tariff is $50 or $20 for a visa, and then it's delayed, it's on the desk, you come the next day, you come 1 week later, oh no, we could not do it, I'm sorry, yeah, there is some challenge, and you understand already. You need to give some bribes, and then you get your passport and your visa. So that is the difference, you see, between regulated acceleration and unregulated corrupt acceleration. Corruption of procurement, selling goods and services, that's one of the fields that happens, corruption happens quite often. Even in churches. I remember in the Philippines on one island, I visited the village, and then the president of the church complained and said, "We have a problem. This pastor in this village, with some bribes, transferred the pastor's house on his name. And we cannot go to court because we will lose it." So they lost the parish house. Why? Because the pastor was close to retirement. He had no retirement fund, and he said, "Yeah, I want to leave and I need to leave." So he made this deviation. That is abuse of goods and services. You transfer property which does not belong to you. And that is why I said asset management is a key element also for religious organizations, to be very clear on procedures, how to monitor. And the problem is often when you have big lands, I think that is a bit less the case here in Indonesia, but in other countries where churches have huge land, but it's not registered. So where is the border exactly? In Ghana, they have a Trinity University College, which is a famous theological institution. And I visited there, and the rector said, "Look, this little house in the corner of our compound." One of the professors made a deal with the government to get a piece of land, which is the land of the faculty. Because the land was not clearly delimited. What is exactly the border? And he used this little unclarity, lack of clarity, to transfer the piece of land to build a house on it. I could tell many stories, but I just tell the stories to show what I say is not just theory. it is based on experience. Corruption of donations, if you get from Kirchenaktie or whatever, the donation for a project, it's so-called earmarked. It has to be used for this purpose. Now what you do if you are a team and you're an honest team but you have a lack of funds, so do you use it for the purpose that it was given, or you say, oh, but we have urgent other needs, this and this. I transfer it not for my pocket, but for another goal. And that is a real problem for many leadership positions. The solution is only to say, I have to spend it for that, and if there is a reason that this project is not the priority, I have to negotiate with the donor, and the donor may agree to earmark for something similar or other. But it's not me who decides as the recipient of the donation. I have to have the agreement of the partner. One thing also, and I'm sure it's not happening here in Indonesia, but I know in many countries, that there is a so-called sexual abuse corruption. If a professor wants to, if a student wants to pass the exam and is a bit weak maybe in the results, the professor may give the signal, you may pass, I may be able to show you a way out, And then they sleep, and then she passes, Also, this is not invented. Unfortunately, I have never heard here in Indonesia, but I know in especially Africa, but also Europe, also other Asian countries. So then the great corruption, nepotism, favoritism, clientelism, collusion, and so on. So we will come back to that on the next slide. So what is the solution when we have that? And I come with a very simple answer that after all these decades, I found one key element. And of course, the implementation is not as simple as it looks like. And that is this. I call it integrity, the one-letter revolution. We have the N, and the N stands for the me. Now if you turn the N, what does it give? It gives the W. So from the me to the we is the solution in my view. What does it mean? And I'll show you in the next slide. Corruption normally, it starts with those who have a little or a bit more power. The policeman is a little person but has a little power, at least to stop a car. A minister has a big power, but it's power. It's about power, top down. The driver of the car is in a weaker position than the police on the road. Now, I start here, the abuse of power leadership. That is the corrupt system, so to say. It's based on roots of power manipulation, of mistrust, of personal interests. I'm now head of a company. And company is not a good example because a private company is, if the owner is the private owner, of course you can say I'm the owner. But let's take a government entity. And an office of his director of water resources in Duta. And he is this type of person. I want power, I want additional income, And how to do that? Absolute loyalty. I want staff who obey to my orders. That's the key. So don't challenge me. I employ you as my secretary, as my director of staff, or whatever, but you need to prove that you are loyal to my orders. And that means that if I want to deviate some resources from my department, the secretary or the head of finance has to sign documents where the head of finance may that's not clear. Why is there a percentage going into an account which is not an official account? But he has to be loyal, otherwise he will be kicked out. So loyalty is the precondition for use of resources. Unqualified staff. Then you don't select the best staff, you select the most loyal staff. You say, okay, oh, you are my nephew. Oh, my brother is, you are the daughter of my brother. Please come to my office. Because the loyalty is bigger if there is a family relation, normally. So this is then where nepotism comes in. So my nephew may not be the most qualified, but the most loyal. And then I make divisions and conflicts. Divide et impera was the motto in the old Roman Empire. You divide, and then it's easier to rule and to dominate. That's a corruption system. And it's all about me. When I am in power, I want to get out the most of it. And I must say, without being now too political, but I was afraid when I was reading the latest decisions last 10 days of President-elect Trump. And the media, it's not my wording, but the media said, how does it come? A Fox journalist who is now the Minister of Justice. The question was not, is it a top independent law expert? My friend, he was always good to me, Trump, in the Fox News. I make him the Minister of Justice. Imagine, in the biggest democracy of the world. So, this is the corrupt system. Now, what is the integrity system? Trust, competence, integrity, common ground, good, honesty. I want to have a team with integrity and trust. I can take another example. We have the honor to have the dean with us, or the faculty. I'm not talking about Professor Sethi, about the function as a dean. So, you want the best for the faculty. You want that the faculty can grow, that the faculty can get the reputation or maintain the high reputation it has. What do I do? Trust the best experts. I don't want to have my nephew. I want to have the best professors. I make a competition, and I choose, or we as a team choose the best, because that raises the quality and reputation. Rules and controls. We have rules and standards, and I apply them also for myself as a team. Credibility, performance, growth, best experts. And that is then what I call the we. It's not about me as a team, it's about the service for our faculty. So this is, I think, the core of corruption or overcoming corruption. Now, integrity as the core virtue, you could say, oh, that's a modern word. But if you look at the Bible, you see that same conflict already there. In the Old Testament, in Exodus, you have the first verses about corruption, not the first, but some of the oldest. So it's already the corrupt judge was in the Bible since the invention of a judiciary. No. First kingdoms do not have separation of the judiciary and the king. The king was also the highest judge. But when it was invented, this separation, there was already a corrupt judge in the Old Testament saying, oh, and the prophet accused him and said, you judge, you take the bribe from the rich so that the poor person does not get his right. 2,500 years ago, imagine. I think it's Exodus in the first 10 chapters somewhere. So, in the Psalms, Lord, who may dwell in your sacred tent, who may live on your holy mountain, the one whose walk is blameless, righteous, with truth. Even here, who does not accept a bribe against the innocent. Imagine, the psalm was singing about corruption and how to overcome. And the prayer that God, Lord, give us the strength to overcome corruption. And we could quote also the Quran, but one of my favorite stories is in Luke 12, the good and the bad manager. You know the story when Jesus took this parable, saying there was a good manager and the bad. The bad manager said, oh, my boss is far away and he's traveling, so now I'm the owner. And I exploit my staff, I drink, I become alcoholic, I abuse the resources, I abuse the girls, employees, all that is in the story, you know. And then the good manager is the one who keeps the value of the company, who increases the value of the company. And of course it's a story, it's a parable for the kingdom of God. Don't think God is away and we can do on earth what we want. We are responsible, we are accountable to God at the end of the life, what we did with the many gifts that God gave us. So, a leader with integrity, I don't summarize, but I said it already. Maybe the last point here is an important point. Is able to recognize and correct mistakes, own and others, and accept own limitations and the need to cooperate with others. You know, corrupt people often tend to over-validate themselves. Oh, I'm the boss, I know everything, I don't need anybody, and there's certainly not somebody who wants to correct me. Please don't say I'm wrong. You are out of my company. But the integrity leader says, oh, criticism is welcome. I may also fail. Please correct if there is something. Or you observe a company. We have a blackboard and please note it with name or without name. Then we can discuss it, how to improve the company. You see, these are different cultures and different value systems. So, I always said, and I was since my young age in leadership positions for whatever reasons, but I always said I need, even as a leader of an organization, I need somebody above me who can correct me. As a director, I have a president. The president is my supervisor. As a president of the board, I have a board. And I told my board in Ethics and in the other boards, please, don't think I'm the boss. I'm of course the president. I take my responsibility. But you as a board have the responsibility to supervise also the president. And if the president uses the power, please stop it. So you see, that's checks and balances, accepting the rules. After 8 years as president of Probethics, and I'm the founder of the organization, people said, yeah, we can change the statutes. We are free to extend and say the board member and the president can stay not for 8 years, but for 10 or 12 or whatever. I refused. I said, I made these statutes because I want the limitation of power and renewal. And we have a good new president. I would be still active enough. I have the energy to be president. But I said, no. We need transition of power as a part of good governance. And I want to hand over my power to the next president as long as I'm still clear in my head. You know? So I try to live good governance in a modest way. Now, integrity builds trust. I don't go into details so that we have also time for discussion. Now, what is the value system that we have? You can say, oh, values, Indonesian values, Japanese values are different from European or Swiss or Chinese values. But I found that we have a lot of common values. And this is a list of values I discovered around the globe. And my teaching and presence in Indonesia helped me also because you have a very balanced value system. And I learned a lot from your values and the virtues also. Now, virtues are individual characteristics. A person can be courageous or can be compassionate, but values are also for individuals, but also for institutions. You can have the UKDW values in the entry hall. This is our statement with the core values. But the virtues, we cannot say we are a courageous institution. The persons can be courageous or can be with humility. Now, I don't go into details, but the question is now, how can we live these things in an environment where we are confronted with corruption? And the test case is when we talk with entrepreneurs or with people in the business. Because business is tough. And especially now, in all countries, including Indonesia, we have some economic challenges. It's not as easy to earn money, and we have a lot of constraints. And what do you do if you need urgently a deal for whatever company you have to sell something or to buy something? And I did training with Chinese Christian entrepreneurs. I remember, Yahya, your thesis was on Christian entrepreneurs or Chinese entrepreneurs in Indonesia, and so you're an expert on that. But we did trainings with Chinese Christian entrepreneurs. In China, you know, Christians, most of the Christians are first-generation Christians. They were born not as Christians. They became Christians when they have been already entrepreneurs or professionals, 20, 30, 40 years old. And they came and said, since I'm a Christian, I have a big problem. I cannot be a Christian, and as a Christian, we should be without corruption. As a businessman, there's no way without corruption. So I have two sides, and many came and said, I think I have to either give up my faith or give up my business. I cannot reconcile that. And we train them in Christian entrepreneurs trainings, even a master of 12 months, and to try to find solutions for this kind of dilemma. And we published it in this book that you have seen here. You can download it also for free. We call it The Better Sinner, a practical guide on corruption. What did we do? We had meetings and we asked all of them, please write down your dilemma that you have. You want to be corrupt-free, but you have a business, a restaurant, you need to buy food for your restaurant, whatever. You cannot get it without corruption. What do you do? Huh? And so on and so on. So we collected the 20-30 cases, and then we tried to find what is the solution. And one of the key elements was to say the better sinner means we don't need to be saints. We cannot be saints because we are human beings. But maybe we can become better sinners. That means we remain sinners, but we still try step by step to improve the situation, to reduce corruption step by step. So, for example, there was a trend, and I supported that, which was called zero tolerance. No bribes at all, zero. That's the cut we have to make. But my conclusion after many years was many people cannot do that. It's an either or. What happens then is you say zero tolerance, but you still do it on a second level. And I came to the conclusion, and that is also a part of my Protestant ethics, based on Calvin and the other reformers, Luther and Zwingli, and to say honesty is more important than zero corruption. That means the first step to overcome corruption is that we describe the dilemma. And we say, I'm very sorry, I paid this bribe in order to go to the airport in time and to have my visa in time. Then, not to mention. But what is then the solution? And the solution is honesty means not to justify it. I think we are humans, and whatever we do, we need to justify it. Oh, I had to do it because ABC. The Christian answer would be, even if I did it, it was wrong. Ethically wrong. So, we need to live with sin. We need to know that daily we do things that we know was wrong, but we did it. And that's the core of Christian faith, or one of the core issues of Christian faith. You don't need to say, oh, everything was correct what I did. No, I'm not able to do it, but I ask for forgiveness, and anyway, going to heaven is not about being good or bad. That's another chapter I was teaching yesterday in Wacana. So, the work ethics. It's a bit dangerous what I say, because it could be justification. Oh yeah, of course, this Christoph says, yeah, we can continue with corruption. No, because everybody's doing it. No, that's not what I say. I say, if in some cases we do it, we don't justify it. We say it's wrong. And we are honest to say, I did it, because if we don't have this honesty, we have these two layers of ethics. We have the official ethics, everything is fine, and we know what we have to do, and the reality is which is different. And that was the main reason for the reformers. Why did Luther start the Reformation? Not because he wanted to split from the church. He was a Catholic priest. He wanted to reform the Catholic Church, because the Catholic Church at that time was a two-level church. The official church, and then the reality of the corrupt morality. There are two key elements. Don't think Reformation was about nice theological theories. Reformation started with two key facts in the church. The first was corruption, and the second was sexual abuse by priests who were not allowed to marry. Then Luther said, we need to stop this corrupt system, and the second, we need to be allowed to marry, because priests may not be able to handle their sexuality in a proper way, so better to marry than to be to live celibacy, but de facto not. In Zurich, Zwingli, my city, became a reformer when he learned that the Bishop of Constance, which was the Bishop of Zurich, had a system where they paid families 800 illegal children of priests. In his diocese only, there were 800 priests who had children, and then under the table were financed by the bishop in order to keep it secret. Imagine, that was the corrupt system. So Zwingli said, I married, so my family life should be transparent in order to overcome this kind of double standards. So you see, corruption was an issue in theology, and that's why Protestant churches and Catholic also nowadays do a lot. But unfortunately, on that level, it was not possible to do. Now I get your signal, so it should come to an end. I start with 2-3 slides. One is, in the book you find 35 recommendations in 7 areas when it comes to corruption-free churches: theology and ethics, governance, resources, preaching, teaching, gender, sanctions, databases, and so on. So wait until January or February, then you have the new version, or you can download already the old version, which includes all that. So I don't go through the rest, except maybe one thing is a key issue. When we talk about corruption, in a situation of very difficult salary situations, you have not yet salaries, your students, maybe some of your working students, but you also know the constraints. What you get is from your parents or from a scholarship, maybe tight, you know. But once you are in the professional life and you get a salary of a few $100s, and you cannot live with it. So how to settle that? That's why we need to think about money in order to overcome corruption. And one is, what is a decent salary? And of course, pastors. I visited the village last month, Tuesday, village in a mountain behind Salatiga. The village has 350 people. The pastor gets a salary of $100 per month. I said, how can you live? Huh? So with a salary of $100, it's very difficult, a very honest pastor and committed to serve this village. So, but we need these salaries, increase teacher salaries in the education budgets, redirect government budgets from the military to education, sanction, also corrupt teachers. But this is now the big geopolitical issue. Every day, military budgets have to be increased, education budgets have to be reduced. That's the official program of the new government in the US, but many other countries follow that logic. And that is disastrous. And I think we all need to do a lot in order to convince our government, don't do the same mistake as some superpowers do. China does the same. They increase the military budget. Of course, they still try to maintain the education budget, but this is exactly the opposite what we need. And then people, even middle-class people, and all the figures show that, middle-class people go back to poverty, some people, and then we have conflicts, and we know the history. So I could take another week to talk to you about other topics, but with that I will, just as you are students, not youth, but young adults. 9 December 24, International Anti-Corruption Day with the theme Uniting with Youth Against Corruption, Shaping Tomorrow's Integrity. That's an official UN campaign. So look at that website and maybe you reflect, can you use 9 December as a day where you as students reflect how to put that on the table, Uniting with Youth Against Corruption. So that is my end. Thank you so much. Terima kasih.
Yes. Ya, kita masih ada mungkin sekitar 10 sampai 15 menit. Kita langsung tanya jawab aja. Siapa yang mau bertanya, silakan. Saya persilakan, bisa dalam bahasa Inggris atau dalam bahasa Indonesia. Nanti saya akan sampaikan ke Pak Christoph. Ben, ada lagi? Oke.
Saya mau bertanya mengenai strategi untuk anti korupsinya berkaitan dengan gaji. Jadi di situ Pak Stücklerberger memberikan solusi, salah satunya adalah pengalihan anggaran pemerintahan dari militer kepada edukasi. Dan salah satu argumentasinya adalah dengan tidak mengulang kesalahan yang sama seperti yang dilakukan global power, kayak misalnya China atau US gitu. Nah, setidaknya saya melihat kenapa harus militer jika misalnya itu berada dalam konteks Indonesia. Tetapi kalau misalnya konteksnya Amerika Serikat misalnya, ya itu mungkin sesuatu yang masuk akal. Karena di satu sisi ya kalau secara sistem kondisi geopolitik di Indonesia, kalau bukan militer yang bisa melindungi setidaknya ancaman seperti klaim naik lainnya China, lalu siapa lagi? Sedangkan di satu sisi ya anggaran untuk Kementerian Ristek itu sendiri hanya satu tingkat di bawah anggaran pertahanan. Apakah itu menjadi suatu solusi yang memang tepat dalam konteks Indonesia atau tidak?
Maybe we collect 2-3 questions.
Oke. Yang lain lagi ada pertanyaan? Kita kumpulkan dulu dari Ben satu ya.
Peter, Michael.
Ada yang mau tanya? Nanti ada yang mau tanya? Oh iya, selain
Ya.
Saya ingin bertanya mengenai di awal tadi mengenai pertambangan. Saya sempat mendengar bahwa Bapak Stücklerberg ini setuju dengan di mana gereja itu bisa juga mengambil bagian dalam pertambangan. Tapi dengan sarana bahwa itu harus betul-betul transparan, diurus dengan seadil-adilnya gitu ya. Namun pada kenyataannya yang saya banyak lihat, yang saya banyak baca adalah argumentasinya selalu menolak pada unsur ekologis itu sendiri. Jadi walaupun memang gereja bisa mengambil pertambangan, tapi di sisi lain banyak orang juga yang tidak setuju dengan argumentasi ekologis. Kira-kira kalau misalnya ditabrakan dengan argumentasi ekologis, bagaimana dari sudut pandang?
Thomas itu sharing mau nanya. Thomas mau nanya.
Okay, maybe
Thomas mau nanya.
yang terakhir
Benar nih.
sebelum the women,
mau nanya.
perempuan, female.
Oh.
Di daerah saya itu Pak,
Nama?
oh iya, daerah saya itu di Tarutung,
Nama siapa?
oh namanya Tere Pak, Teresia. Daerah saya itu di Tarutung itu terkenal dengan kayu minyak kayu putihnya, dan itu menjadikan tanah itu adalah tanah yang kering dan banyak kayak udah kering gitu kan Pak, jadinya kayak lahannya itu gersang, padahal itu daerah yang dekat dengan Danau Toba begitu. Gimana kan itu ada juga unsur dari gereja sendiri Pak yang masuk ke dalam itu melalui gereja gitu Pak, kayak mungkin ada kayak pembelian tanah, tapi kayak ada unsur-unsur kayak uang yang dikasih, dan itu aku sempat baca yang di langkah-langkah untuk menjadi pendosa sih dari Google Translate-nya dibikin pendosa yang lebih baik.
Bisa singkat lagi.
Oh ya, jujur jangan pernah meminta atau menerima suap. Aku sebenarnya mau nanya gimana sih tanggapan dari Bapak mengenai kita gimana bisa di gereja itu turun dalam bisa kayak mengasih tahu itu tidak sesuai dengan etika gitu, etika kayak etika Kristen untuk menemani untuk kekristenan sendiri. Terima kasih.
Thank you very much. Yeah, it's interesting. You all, two of the three questions look at the business part. Shift from the military to the education, it's very difficult question because the countries which are not superpowers, they often have just to run behind them, and they are forced to do the same shift even if they don't want it. And they say, yeah, but if the powers, the conflict in the region is increasing, we also need to be prepared. So we understand the logic of the government. But at the same time, I think we need people, we need the population who say, look, if you do it on the back of education, for example, or of the health system, you run risks of conflicts inside the country. You may be better placed with some weapons from international conflicts, but what do? If people go to the street because they cannot pay their health bill and they cannot pay their education system. So I think, and the rectors, the
the university leaders, but also you as students. You can raise your voice and say, please consider the importance of education for peace. You need to argue. You need to find the good arguments and the facts and figures. And what I say is not invented. We know from history when education and health budgets are cut in favor of military, it is creating conflicts, non-violent but also violent conflicts within the countries. I'm a generation, when I was a student like you, or even in high school, there was the Vietnam War of America. And the people went to the street, we all went to the street in Europe, in America, around the globe, to say what happens if US uses all the expenditure for a war in far Vietnam instead of funding their health and education. So I see almost a repetition of history 50 years later. I'm sorry to say that. But so that's why I think the people need to raise the voice. The second is the mining. It's an important point that we don't think that that's an easy issue. There are also good arguments to say, no, churches should not go into business. But I'm in favor that churches should consider, be cautious, consider to be partnering there, normally not as church. A pastor or a church leader, a president of GKI or whichever church should not be a businessman, but create a foundation for mining to create income for the church, but do the main mining then exemplary. Means, yes, we do mining out of a condition that is socially and environmentally ethical mining. Now, people may say that's not possible, but we have examples that it is possible to have strict environmental management in a mining sector even. And then, of course, the key issue is also indigenous people or tribal people living in mining areas. These are all very sensitive issues, but if the church can show we have a positive showcase of mining, which is better than the dirty mining that are in the media, then of course it could be not only creating income, but it could be a role model. I can help you if you need some contacts to fair mining. Fair mining is a must today if you do mining. The third is about business and environment in a specific area. So palm oil is also one of these highly debated issues. Many people in outside Asia now say, oh, palm oil, stop it, it's environmental disaster, so don't buy palm oil anymore. But again, I think the question is, we as churches, if we go into these kind of sectors and we want to help people to get jobs, to get wealth, to get at least some income, so doing that is not bad, but we need to do it in an environmentally correct way. And we all have to learn. 20 years ago, palm oil seemed to be a good strategy. Now we know that there are negative impacts. So the churches has experts. I know 20, 30 years ago already, there was a professor of environmental ethics in Jakarta, Theological College. And he was specialized on that. You can have an environmental study institute. You have professors like Yahya Wijaya and others who can help to have them, if a church has this challenge, try to get an expertise. What is environmentally positive and defendable palm oil, or if not palm oil, an alternative production so that churches can help to create income. microfinance. We could talk a lot about that, but don't be disencouraged if you feel there is a problem. Take it as an opportunity to find solutions. Thank you.
Ya, perlu dijelaskan ya. Tadi terkait dengan militer, dana yang ke budget dari militer ke education ya. Pak Christoph tadi katakan kita juga harus aware dengan persoalan tidak hanya international konflik, tapi juga internal konflik. Ya. Lalu terkait dengan internal konflik, Pak Stücklerberger bilang, Pak Christoph bilang bahwa kita sebagai salah satunya sebagai para pemuda mahasiswa itu kita harus juga promote atau mendorong pentingnya pendidikan untuk perdamaian, bukan hanya sekedar alusista dan seterusnya. Mungkin negara superpower sudah persoalan dengan itu, tapi persoalannya kan kalau bukan negara superpower, apakah kita harus concern dengan persoalan militer kepada Indonesia? Ya, tadi kan itu ya. Kalau terkait dengan ecological problem tadi sudah selesai. Baik, saya pikir waktunya sudah cukup, gitu ya, jam 12. So it's been a fantastic conversation. Thank you for your lecture, Christoph Stücklerberger. I think on behalf of the faculty, we thank you and we're grateful about your lecture today, and we hope this will occur again soon for another lecture.
Thank you so much for inviting me. It was a pleasure to meet you, and you have also on the first slide you saw my contact, so in case you have some concrete questions, maybe I can give you a link to an organization working on these things or whatever. And you have all these qualified high-level professors who will even better answer your questions after this lecture. If you would allow, can we take a group picture? Okay.
Mari kita beri tepuk tangan buat Pak. Kita foto bersama dengan Pak Christoph. Mungkin dari depan ke belakang gitu ya. Maybe we can stand over here, Pak Christoph. So
Siapa yang mau jadi fotografer?
Ini Pak.
Mau ngumpul jadi satu atau luas begini? Ladies. Kesini kita di sini Pak. Mungkin di tengah. Kumpul di tengah. Mungkin ke tengah. Kumpul tengah aja. Ya. Di sini depan ini loh. Ini masih ada. Itu punya Nela sebenarnya? Bukan.
1, 2, 3. Sekali lagi. 1, 2, 3. Lagi ya. 1, 2, 3. Lagi. 1, 2,
Teman-teman, materi sama buku terkait dengan presentasi itu sudah dikirim ke grup kelas yang teman-teman yang 24, saya kirim ke grupnya kekristenan dan konteks. Iya. Ya, jadi materi presentasinya sama bukunya. Ya.